at the moment. Just turns out we know. I've managed to. Hopefully, I've sorted the sound out now. I've just been told we had no sound. I think I just had to change the settings. Sorry, yeah, I'll just repeat what I just said. We've got to the end of the first day of questioning of HN118, the undercover police officer using the cover name Simon Welling's infiltrating a globalized resistance and dissent. We've come to the end of his infiltration of globalized resistance. I'm joined by Guy Taylor, Noel Douglas, and regular of this parish, Kate Wilson of Police Spies Out of Lives. What have you made of what he had to say today?
Yeah, a few high points. Firstly, when he cried, that was always that was a delight to see. The fact that the constant lying in his life chipped away at his soul, which is equally as enjoyable to listen to. I thought the way he tried to wriggle out of all the inaccuracies and all the lies in his reports, saying that someone else typed that was someone typing it up after he gave evidence, or that was it was sexed up by someone else unknown after he'd made the report. It was quite astonishing to see that, and so that was quite amazing. I quite enjoyed the bit towards the end where he spoke of he was asked questions about a meeting with a globalized resistance member in a vegan restaurant in Soho, where he came out with this really quite amazing theatrical report about it, and she had actually written to me after the event, well, not quite a long time after the event, when the inquiry was when we realized we're going to be giving evidence. I wrote to all the people I could in Globalize, asking for photographs, memories, and everything they had on Welling's. And she wrote, quite unprompted, I didn't even know at that point she'd had a meeting with him, and she'd written this account of it, saying, I felt awkward, even if I didn't believe he was a spy. I didn't feel comfortable talking to him, and it petered out. But he gave this very, very detailed and very, very flowery description of the meeting, where apparently I'd confessed to her that I was having nightmares about kicking him out of GR.
Being judged by a higher power.
A higher power.
It really painted a picture. I mean, I've got to be honest. I didn't know if you'd ever such a religious man.
No, I was brought up a Catholic, but I mean, I don't even feel guilty about not being a Catholic anymore. So I think that's dealt with. It was just amazing. I mean, I don't know where he gets it from, and the fact that I only kicked him out because the SWP Central Committee told me to. In fact, the reality is, two members of this Central Committee knew about it, and they were Alex Klinikos and Chris Nyden. When I told them both, kicking him out because he's a spy, or an informant at least, and they said, "Oh, fair enough." It's just his. He likes to get elaborate when he lies, doesn't he? He always tries to make up extra bits of the story to give it a bit of but he's got a better memory for all that kind of crap than he does for any other thing which went on back in the day. And also, I mean, like, the people at home won't be able to see this, but we can see him when he's giving evidence, and his hand always goes up to his mouth when he's lying, and God, that was quite a busy hand today, wasn't it?
A lot of that,
yeah.
Stroking the jazz dog.
Very, very, very busy hand. But yeah, there was lots more actually. But Noel, what do you reckon?
Well, if that makes sense, I think that was interesting. That every other sentence was "if that makes sense."
Gee whiz!
As if he was trying to not make sense. I thought there's lots of interesting things, isn't there? I mean, one, obviously, he basically admitted that there was no point in him being put in as a spy. I mean, he did. I mean, that didn't he? Then it was but then there was also the weird thing where he denied the political policing, whilst at the same time talking about the SWP's program and all these other things.
Claimed not to understand what political policing could possibly be. And he also, similarly, when he was asked about the quite striking bit where Mike Dell says, should we leave globalized resistance intact or should we destroy them? And he kind of says, well, I'm not really sure how we would have done that, even if it would have been lawful.
and then I think also that the admittance that, or whatever the truth of the embellishing of reports by other people, I mean, that's kind of goes both ways as well, doesn't it? I mean, one, it reports it's just to his lack of truthfulness in his reporting, but then if it is the case that managers are also sexing up the documents after the fact, that's also outrageous, isn't it? You know what I mean? So it's kind of, there was just so much, and I thought it was really good the way that the question QC got him on just some of the awfulness of his reporting, in terms of descriptions of people, obviously the thing with Guy and his relationship with his girlfriend. So again, this like we've had with other defendants, you know, the fact that, you know, what is the point of this reporting? You know, who our girlfriends are, where we're going on holiday, all this sort of stuff, nothing to do with it, you know. And yeah, it was, you know, it's this what he's all his language as well is all sort of militarized and police and kind of there's a lot of aphorisms and you know, it's very, I find it very dehumanized the way he talks, even though, you know, he sort of tried to big up the fact that he himself had been, you know, was losing his humanity while spying on us.
I think it's worth saying that he doubled down on the identity of the person who he claims made the suicide vest idea, and everyone in the room heard the chink as a new piece of his soul dropped off that he will never get back when he said that. And I think we see that a lot. I mean, when he broke down and cried and he talked about the toll that lying like this takes on a person, you know, I did think maybe he's going to be the one, you know, who actually says, I'm just going to come clean. I'm going to put my soul back together and I'm going to walk out of this room with my head held high because at least I did it in the end. He's got another day to do that. But the fact that he doubled down on MT's identity when it's so clear that it wasn't him and so insulting.
But I think he's a real organisation man. I mean, that's what I mean by the language. You know, he's so, you could tell he sort of really loves being a police officer and, you know, the whole thing, the hierarchy, and I'm sure he loved the fact that he became daddy, you know, big daddy or whatever.
Field daddy.
Big daddy, you know, we kind of reduce it to the ridiculous level it should be. But you know what I mean? All
apologies to Shirley Crabtree.
You know, and all the ring wraith and Groundhog Day and all that. You know, there's all that in his reporting, isn't it? Where he goes, "Yo, groundhog" at the stop, or like, you know, all this sort of real teenage boy type sort of, which obviously we see throughout the Spy Cops thing, this kind of boys club sort of mentality and stuff. Yeah, you know, so I think I'd love it as well because you did feel that it's quite interesting because I think there is, I mean, not to give him any sympathy, but there obviously is a level I think where he genuinely has been, what's the word? Like through being with us, he obviously did, I think, kind of pick up some sense in which, you know, we were nice people.
Bless your heart.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And that obviously did kind of cause him some sort of. Well, no, but you know what I mean. I think it's kind of interesting. I'm not giving him any sympathy whatsoever. Sure. But it's kind of interesting to see that kind of contradiction I think kind of working in his brain even now. You know what I mean?
I mean, it was very noticeable that he did take the opportunity to like offer no defence in terms of yes, that was inappropriate. I regret it. From the beginning of my deployment, and he gave the impression that he was going to come clean in some sense. But I think he drove a coach and horses through that on a number of occasions. One thing that really struck out to me, and I think it was really evident when he talked about the time that he rang you on the phone, is how incredibly dull and boring and long-winded and unnecessarily verbose he insisted on being about matters of no importance, which I think to me is a real sign of someone who is being intentionally dishonest and is attempting to pull the wool over the eyes. I mean, just in that one example of like accidentally phoning you, he was like, there he was. He went to his electronic phone book, and then he would have put the phone to his ear, and then he would have said hello, whatever it was, and I don't know, was there called most of that? And then he went to me, and it's just like this, and this is Bob Lambert's school of nonsense yet again. And I think this is something we've seen repeatedly from undercover cops. It shows they are not engaging with the inquiry in good faith, that they are attempting to, you know, to like flap and waste time and like put too much detail into things in order to drag it all out a bit and hopefully not get those difficult questions when they're really being put on the spot. I don't know. Just quickly, I mean, like, okay, where do you think he ranks in terms of undercover officers, avoiding the truth?
The thing is, he comes across to me as such a pathetic character. not only now, but back then as well. Yes. Yeah. Like he doesn't.
I mean, that was part of his legend, was he was a pathetic character.
Yeah, and so I find it quite hard to place him at all. I mean, you know, I suffer from an excess of empathy, and I have to say that just imagining that sinking feeling he must have got when he realized that he had made that phone call and he had been recorded, was, I really felt for the guy, just like, what a fuck up. And knowing as well what a kind of macho elite, all the stuff we've heard about high maintenance and low maintenance officers and everything else about the culture of the SDS. I mean, he must have just been there thinking they're just going to roast me alive. Like, I will never live it down. Not like this is going to be disciplinary, not this is dangerous. Just, I mean, what he said, embarrassment. He was going to have to go back and face whatever the SDS equivalent of the Court of the Star Chamber was by the early 2000s. And what I think is interesting, though, is that we're looking at the end of the SDS. And they didn't pull him out. And not only did they not pull him out, but the hyperbole and the sexing up and the exaggeration that surrounds his... And he said it just towards the end. He said, I didn't want to go out because I knew the G8 was coming up. And I knew that there was going to be... He pretty much said, I knew there was going to be a shit ton of money and prestige and resources around that. And I didn't want that taken away. It was like he got injured just before the cup final. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was that. But at the beginning of his evidence, saying I was pleading to get out. I mean, it's a total contradiction with what he said. He was saying I should have left a few months earlier. I should have left it. I was drinking more because that was medication, because I hated it in there and what have you. So. Yeah, again, more contradiction from the
that
boy.
Was 2007. That was after all the. That was after the
That's true. But I mean, it's what I wanted to say is look at the way he bats things off to every quarter. I mean, like that description of his performance at the confrontation where we kicked him out, the bravura of performance, his sharpness, professionalism, and I can't remember
fortitude. Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, that was written by his superior manager, Mike Dell, and I mean, I personally, I mean, it really reminded me of like something I've experienced before in my life, of like this thing of where you're passing on like a report and you can't be critical. So what you do instead is you use excessive hyperbole to like point out that I mean the opposite. I mean, I think that report was saying, I mean the opposite. He shat the bed and cried everywhere. But like, we can't say that because like you can't give a bad reference for someone. So you give like an overly strong reference that goes, this is obviously bollocks then, isn't it?
It is obviously bollocks. And I mean, it was quite interesting to hear him say, well, I cried and only two of those people cried and all the rest of it. It was because that report has been running through my head since I first read it about a year ago. And I'm just so pleased to see it completely demolished. And there's so many things completely demolished today.
I mean, it was interesting though at that point because he'd already said that he didn't watch your evidence, that he hadn't read your written statement. Yeah, which obviously bullshit, I think. But then also, I mean, he referenced that he had heard your evidence, Noel, and some of the comments he was like the phone call part. He was like directly referencing what you'd said. So I mean, he didn't actually say that he hadn't watched yours, but I mean, it's obviously he's bullshitting that whole like kind of topic.
Yeah, there was gallons of bullshit, wasn't there today? And did you want?
No, I just wanted to say that at the very beginning he actually referred to himself as a grey man, which suggests to me that not only has he watched all the evidence, he's also watched all the reaction videos about it.
Yeah, if you're watching now, we all think you're a prick.
I mean, the thing is, I suppose the one thing is it's so hard actually, isn't it, to know, because the weird thing I suppose, which is what other people experience, is seeing the contemporary spy cops. Is it really brings it home to you how it was a performance and a role, and that kind of, so that's as the only way I bracket what I said earlier about it being interesting within breaking down is how much of this is a performance and a calculated thing, which I'm sure it must be true with some of the other evidence, so that that thing of like saying, like say I haven't watched Guy's evidence, but like you would not come into this, so then you've got 2 days of grilling and not have watched what people have said about you and thought about what you're going to say in response,
especially for someone who purports to be a detail orientated professional. I mean, come on. You know, I mean, what nonsense. Before we go, we have a couple of comments, and there seems to be getting lots more, so let's deal with them now. One from Proudhon. HN118 Simon Welling's evidence this inquiry is so obviously still part of his cover. It's disgusting. What a vile piggy. I mean, I think a sentiment we all share. Another one, also from Proudhon. I would have been gone if I was dodgy, guys. Honestly, don't you see? Cries. Shame. Under the jail. And then another one from Onboard Navy. Lovely bit of Greek implicature, Tom. I don't know what that means. I've got to be honest. To tell me what that means, Onboard Navy. I'm not familiar with the reference. Yeah, I mean, that's all the sensible comments so far. There's a lot more to come from Simon Welling tomorrow when we go into his well, he even said himself, not his infiltration of dissent, but the fact that he would put himself in a position to report on dissent, which seemed a lot more honest. I was just going to ask first, though, is there anything about his infiltration of globalized resistance you feel really wasn't covered today?
I think there are little bits, and I do wonder whether, because I can't imagine the dissent stuff could take a whole day, to be honest with you, because obviously it was like less. Well, I mean, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
But you know, like, well, that's something could be interesting. That's why it's gonna be interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe the QC will come back with some specific things and weave it into the stuff, because I think that was what was quite good about this afternoon was there was a lot of setting up of him, wasn't there? Which I think he may or may not have been aware of, you know, but he seemed that he wasn't aware of sort of some of it, you know. So the 100 pints thing was quite good fun, wasn't it? With the, you know, we got to admit it was on 50, it was on 50, and then it was on 60, and then it's and now it's 100, you know. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see tomorrow what, you know. I'm hoping that. I think there's a few things that he could come back on, you know what I mean, in terms of the evidence we've given, because there's a lot of stuff. But yeah, no, it's going to be a very interesting day.
I mean, his comment at the end of that he didn't really infiltrate dissent because dissent wasn't something you could really infiltrate. He just put himself in a position. You know, I really can't wait to hear Marco Jacobs, Mark Kennedy, or Lynn Watson giving evidence on whether or not you could or couldn't infiltrate dissent, and what the role of Simon Wellings was in all that. I mean, you know, either he was infiltrating dissent or he wasn't. If he was infiltrating dissent, he was alongside those guys because they really were at the heart of what was going on in dissent, right from the time that Simon Wellings claims to have got involved, which means he would have been seeing Mark Kennedy with the various relationships that he had. It means he would have been seeing Marco Jacobs and the relationships that he had. And I have a query around I want to know where Welling's intelligence was coming from. Some of it was obviously coming from online, but some of it wasn't. And so was he there? Was he stealing MPOIU intelligence and filing it with the STS? Because we know those officers were there. You know, what was he doing? Was he running his own network of informants so he didn't have to show his face? I mean, what was he doing? Because this guy filed thousands of reports. And when he switches from globalized resistance to dissent, he becomes more prolific, not less, almost immediately.
I think we got a bit of a hint of how he did so many reports today when we saw his reports of the 15th of July 2003, where there was 4 reports on that day, of which easily could have been one. I mean, some of them were just like, the phone number of the person I mentioned in the last report is this. And you start actually going, well, you know, because so many of the reports were just handing in a leaflet and then that leaflet being turned into a report, one phone call being 4 reports, that actually this very prolific reporter, when you actually break it down, you start going, it's actually not that many. And I mean, as you say, you know, like it appears that, you know, for the most part, what he was doing was turning up to events from a distance. You know, I mean, we don't know how many social events he was at a distance at, eavesdropping on conversations, doing all those kind of things. It will be interesting to see like how he kind of explains the way that he did his, as he says, not the infiltration, but the reporting on of dissent.
I mean, I wonder whether he's been shown the witness statement that we produced when, out of the blue, a week before he gives evidence, we find out that he's essentially claiming to have been the man spying on all the G8 mobilizations. And you know, but the theme from the dissent stuff really is there wasn't a social center in Europe that this guy couldn't walk into and find someone that he knows, which is just such a stark contrast to the fact that actually nobody remembers him. A few people have brief recollections of like absolutely anodyne conversations with this guy.
I think it does speak to something though about the way we used to organise at the time and the way in which the UK Social Centre network operated. There were a lot of very public events that happened to these things, and I mean, I would go to often with one friend go to another city to a public event in a UK in a social centre, and you would walk in without being, nobody was kind of like checking who you were, and you'd strike up conversation with someone quite easily because people were being open and friendly. Right. So, I mean, I kind of believe that he could have walked into any social centre, at least in the UK. Rest of Europe, I'm not so sure. But in most of the UK, and like kind of by showing that he'd been at some other event, or say, oh, I remember that, by pointing at a poster on the wall, could get into a conversation quite easily with somebody about, politics. I don't think it would have been that hard, but it's not infiltration. It's not undercover police work.
I'm not quite so sure, actually, because if I think of you and Simon Welling, there's a vast difference in character, in intellect, in sociability and what have you. And I mean, like when I saw the list of organisations he claimed to have reported on, I mean, space hijackers for one. Yeah. I mean, I know how that came about. We Globalised used to build our props at Limehouse Town Hall, and we used to do so in cahoots with some of the space hijackers. So it was very easy for him to be accepted there because he was part of us and all the rest of it. But he never went to a space hijacker meeting. I don't think he ever even went on a Circle Line party. He didn't do anything with them. He just saw them from a few yards away and reported on them. Not a lot either. I mean, space hijackers probably get 2 or 3 mentions, and that's all through prop making at Limehouse Town Hall. So his exaggeration of his reach and his influence and his acceptability in the movement is vastly overstated, and as such, I'll be surprised. I mean, I was quite amazed to hear him, to hear the evidence last week of Jean-Charles de Menezes' cousin, because he didn't infiltrate that campaign. He didn't get inside it. I mean, like, there's no way he would have done. I mean, he was just a underconfident, pokey little white bloke, and that's not the type of person they had in that campaign. So time and again, he's saying, "Oh, I'm really great," but he's not that far. And so maybe he concentrated on dissent afterwards, but he mentions quite a few other campaigns, and I don't think he really got very close to them at all.
But I do think this point, I mean, it's a wider kind of political point and an institutional point about what was happening in the police intelligence community around the G8. And I think, I mean, Wellings is going to be a focus of that, but it goes beyond that. It goes to the SDS trying to make sure they've got a foot in the door, and I think the similar stuff happens around other big events. There is suddenly there's a budget and there's kudos, and these are the events where you've got Carlos Saraki or Mark Kennedy saying that their reports are going across the desk of the Prime Minister. This is where the government gets involved. So on the one hand, it's kind of laughable, but on the other hand, it's actually really significant that there's this lies and this exaggeration and everything else, which is all about something that is considered so important that it's got all this extra budget, and the government are reading the briefings so it's
UK PLC.
That was a thing.
Yes.
That was a thing that came up today, and I think we're going to have to take up in Rule 10 questions. Is at one point, he was being asked about his reporting and how it wasn't actually relevant at all to public order policing, and he said, well, there are other considerations that we would have had in mind. And I thought he was going to talk about criminality, which, opens them up to, well, you weren't prosecuting anybody, what actual criminality. But he didn't say that. He said national security and economic well-being. And I expected CTI to pick up on that. And instead, CTI said, "Oh, you mean national security subversion, blah, blah, blah,"
Violence,
and violence, and just kind of circumvented around the fact that he had quite clearly said that he was concerned with the economic well-being. And this is where we get to the fact that by this time, the SDS are hand in glove with the corporations. The anti-globalization movement wasn't actually really about kind of government and that kind of subversion at all. It was about corporate power and capitalism. And they don't care about subversion anymore. They don't care about Marx. They care about corporate interests. And I was very surprised that CTI either didn't hear it, didn't understand, just kind of gave him a different list. But I do know that this idea of UK PLC is part of the questions that we have said we want asked of Wellings. So I think we are going to have to come back to that, because the fact that what was foremost in his mind when he's reporting on your relationship with your girlfriend or any of the other awful stuff that he's reporting is the possible impact that it might have for the economic well-being of corporations in the UK.
Disturbing. We've had a couple more comments. One from Onboard Navy explaining the one from earlier, saying something so contextually inappropriate that you're forced to understand the opposite is meant. E.g., made them all cry, then did a wheelie on my chopper. Yes, I get what you mean now. Yeah, that is exactly what I feel was going on. Another comment from Victoria Dawson, another who won't implicate managers, but he did suggest junior officers had possible motive for altering reports because they didn't want the unit disbanding before they could be deployed. Yeah, I mean, I think that was quite interesting, the bits where we got onto the towards the end of the unit and this last-ditch attempt by HN118 for the SDS to continue to exist after Special Branch had been merged with Counter-Terrorism Command. There's just a quick plug for an episode of the Spy Cops Info podcast that myself and Donald Driscoll from the Undercover Research Group did back in October about that final report. That basically showed that that the SDS was a batshit organisation by this point. I mean, had been for the majority of its history, and just simply not in line with the rest of the undercover work that the police were doing. Not that I got any fan of what sort of proper undercover work really should be.
It's nor am I, obviously, but it is very interesting reading the stuff where you get proper police officers coming into contact with the SDS and realizing just how batshit they are. And the same thing I think happens with the MPOIU. So it's not actually about the fact that this was a unit set up in the 1960s. It's about political policing of what are essentially non-violent campaign organizations that, real police look at it and go, what the actual fuck are you monkeys doing? And that you see it over and over and over again. And I think when we get to the closing of the STS, you're going to start seeing it more. And, I think at the point where Mark Kennedy is uncovered and the whole house of cards starts falling down, and you've got the Metropolitan Police Service scrambling to do damage limitation around this, there must have been a hell of a lot of people finding, they might have known that it existed, but they'd never looked at the fine print before, looking at the fine print and going, what have we done? Because they were, and it's because it's secret. And there's this echo chamber and this bubble where they and this reliance on fantasy and sexing things up in order to justify the existence and to justify the jobs. There's this kind of feedback loop.
I think that, which is always worth repeating, because I think some of the reactions to our coverage has missed this, and maybe we haven't reiterated enough. It's not just that they were creating this sexed up intelligence in order to justify the continued existence of the unit, but also it created this bank of intelligence the police could point to and go, if you knew what we knew, if you'd seen the reports that were coming across our desk, if you knew all the plots that we'd foiled, you'd realize that we need to beat the shit out of these hippies on demos because they're dangerous, they're about to kill us all. We've got all this intelligence in our back pockets, which you don't get to see, that justifies everything that we do.
And it's worth remembering that when they start telling you it about other groups
Yes.
that you're not involved in. Every time I see anything around Muslim extremism, I just think of the shit that they wrote about us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean that's so key.
Well, I was saying that because I've said the other day, that's what they've tried to do with Palestine Action,
Yeah.
isn't it? The implication that Iran's behind them or whatever it is. It's obviously just so obviously nonsense. Isn't it?
Yeah, because people couldn't possibly be against the killing of children, could they?
No, it's like, it's shocking, why would we be protesting the IMF and World Bank? Because at that time, 30,000 children a day were dying from their policies. I mean, just actually think of that in reality. Imagine 30,000 children's out there dying every day. And that's again, it just goes back to the whole ridiculousness of us being tagged as the violent ones, doesn't it?
We do have another full day of Simon Welling's tomorrow. As we've said, he has let us down. We've been disappointed yet again. He is not an undercover officer who is willing to actually put the record straight to repair his soul. I'm afraid that Robert Hastings, you are the last hope for that. We're not holding our breath, but no, not even slightly. Quite. I mean, is there anything that you really hope that that Simon Welling's HN118 does come out with tomorrow that is put to him?
To be honest, today has been such a stunning day in many ways. I mean, like there are obvious lacking things, but I mean, like that was better than I hoped for. To be honest with you, he really did fall to pieces, really, and it was an utter vindication of everything me and Noel said last week. So I'm delighted at the moment. I'll probably have a few more ideas. I think a couple of pints will get them coming, and we'll come up with a wish list for tomorrow.
Enjoy your monthly 100. Yeah,
my medicine.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we just hold a prayer meeting tomorrow to hope we can redeem him.
Yeah.
I want him to tell the truth about what he saw. I want him to tell the truth about Mark Kennedy. I want him to tell the truth about Marco Jacobs. He was.
He's such a feminist, as we know from his.
He admitted to being sexist today, though.
Well, that was a key thing, wasn't it? Which again went against the earlier thing of like, everything I've been through is nothing compared to obviously what the women have been receiving this thing. There's nothing I can say, So yes.
I mean, I don't just want him to say what he saw, because it's not like anyone questions those relationships happened. Sure. And
Marco Jacobs still denies it.
Well, Marco Jacobs denies it, but no one actually questions.
I mean, his own superior officers, his fellow undercover officers, everybody else accepts it. But
no, I think because he was there and he did see it, and we know now it was absolutely endemic. It was going on all around them, and I think. He doesn't even have that much to lose by doing that. He didn't have any relationships while he was undercover. He's not even grassing on his own unit.
Right, yeah.
The MPOIU were a rival unit and they were quite clearly batshit as well in their own different ways. So yeah, I really hope that is his soul saving moment, that he says, okay, I'm just gonna tell it like it was. Not holding my breath.
I really recommend that nobody holds their breath. I note that there's 113 people watching. Only 10 of you have liked it. It would make a huge impact to the visibility of these videos if you were to like, share, subscribe, all that sort of thing on. There's another comment here from Victor Dawson, that what's in the back pocket has been replicated in the inquiry with the "if you knew what I know" from the chair. Infuriating. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it was something which there's referring to something that Mitting said to Lindsay after she gave evidence about the deceitful relationship she endured at the hands of Carlos Saraki, where he attempted essentially to justify the deployment of undercover officers based on what has happened in the closed sessions of the inquiry. It was a deeply, as I've said before, was a deeply unchristian thing for John Mitting to do. Also demonstrably false. The fact that these career con men were able to have sessions at the inquiry where there has been no oversight from the people they spied on really undermines everything about it, is absolute nonsense. Is there anything anybody else wants to add? I'm aware that we've been going now for 35 minutes and perhaps people would like to get to the pub.
Pub.
Yeah. 3 votes for the pub. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again tomorrow with the second day of questioning of HN118, cover name Simon Welling's. Please join us then. I'll be doing a preview video before the hearings start and then throughout the day. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.